This is part 2 of chapter 3. So we left off talking about cohesion, and cohesion again is the attraction of water molecules for each other. So think of like going together, water molecules that are attracted to each other. Adhesion, if you think of adding on, for adhesion is the adding of a different molecule, so a non-water molecule being attracted to the water molecule with a hydrogen bond. So this other molecule has to have a hydrogen atom in it in order for there to be this attraction, or at least it has to have some polarity to it. So it can actually be a different thing besides hydrogen, but it must have polarity to it. So adhesion is this attraction between other molecules or atoms to a water molecule. And so adhesion is responsible for the meniscus that we see when we look at a graduated cylinder. And you see this arc that occurs. It's because of the attraction between the water molecules or the liquid molecules in the cylinder. And you'll actually see it much more with water because of the polarity of a water molecule. Being attracted to the glass molecules of the graduated cylinder. So it's actually drawing it up and closer to itself in that attraction, pulls it up, and then causes there to be a dip in the water level. So you can see an actual picture of it over here on the right. The other thing that adhesion is responsible for is capillary action, which is how water will travel up. For example, a glass cylinder. So this same idea of this graduated cylinder and water being attracted to the side, if you bring in the walls to a much closer to each other, this actually ends up causing the water to climb its way up. So it's actually the addition of adhesion and then the cohesion of the water molecules to each other actually draw the water up a very small tube. So that's capillary action. And then adhesion's also responsible for what we see when we dip a paper towel into a liquid. That rising of the liquid up the paper towel is actually the water molecules within it climbing their way up and being drawn along, following each other up this and climbing due to their attraction through hydrogen bonding of the water molecules to the molecules of the paper towel. The most important thing in life, sustaining life on Earth in terms of adhesion and cohesion working together, is the ability of water to be pulled up through a tree through what we call transpiration. So this property of water is actually what allows producers on Earth to get their water from the roots to where their leaves are located and where photosynthesis is going to occur. So the two properties of cohesion and adhesion are entirely responsible for allowing this to occur. And as we look at photosynthesis later on in a later unit, you'll be reminded that water is an essential part of photosynthesis. Without that water molecule, photosynthesis will not occur. And so water must get up from the roots in the ground up to where the photosynthesis is going to occur in the leaves of a plant or a tree. So we'll look at this next animation to see exactly how these two properties, emergent properties of water, actually allow life on Earth to exist from the start of energy conversion in photosynthesis among autotrophs or producers. Oops, I'm going to have to switch to a different one. Hold on.
to the roots that pulls water molecules up the plant. Now let's look at how water and minerals enter through the roots. Roots are highly branched, creating a lot of area for absorption. Root hairs near each root tip increase the surface area. Water and minerals, shown in yellow, can follow two paths from cell to cell within a root. In one path, they travel in the cytoplasm, which is connected between cells. In the other path, they travel within cell walls. In the path within cell walls, however, they encounter a waxy to the xylem and plasma membrane. In this way, only certain minerals can enter the xylem. Water and minerals are pulled up to the leaves. Water evaporates from leaf cells into the air spaces inside leaves and exits through pores. And the highest leaves of a tree.
So that was a really clear and good explanation of transpiration. And I strongly recommend that you study that and make sure that you understand how that occurs and that you can explain how water plays a part and its properties play a part in the ability of plants to get water up to the leaves. So the next emergent property that we'll look at that again has to do with cohesion and adhesion is surface tension. So the hydrogen bonding between water molecules is what allows surface tension to occur. And surface tension is that measure of how hard it is to break the surface of a liquid. So water has an unusually high surface tension due to that hydrogen bonding between the molecules at the air-to-water interplay or interface, and then the water below. So it allows things like this spider to have the ability to walk across as if they're walking on a hard surface. The next emergent property, so departing from the cohesion and adhesion, surface tension grouping of properties, we move into water's high specific heat. So this property of water is what helps, again, maintain life on Earth. Because water can absorb heat from the warmer air and release stored heat to cooler air, helps to moderate the air temperature by bodies of water. So when water can absorb or release large amounts of heat, it does that with only a slight change in its own temperature. So again, there is this moderating effect that occurs. So that's why if you look at weather patterns, even in the Bay Area here, when you watch a weather report, you'll see that by the ocean, so the communities like Half Moon Bay or Pacifica, those areas tend to stay pretty much the same temperature. They're typically in the 60s and 70s, and we have extremes at either end, but they stay pretty much at that temperature. Whereas as we move away from the ocean into places like San Ramon and Doherty Valley, we can get much more extreme changes of temperature. We can get very hot, like today while I'm recording this, it's over 100. Even though it's over 100 here, over by the ocean, it's still going to be in the 70s. And that's because of water's ability to absorb the heat from the air and release the stored heat, if it were a cold day, to warm up air. So this has to do with water's high specific heat. And what that means, specific heat of a substance is the amount of heat that has to be absorbed or lost for 1 gram of that substance to change its temperature by 1 degree centigrade. So the specific heat of water is the standard. It's 1 calorie per gram per centigrade degree. So water resists changing its temperature because it has a very high specific heat. So the next slide will show you again how water can be very consistent in terms of its temperature. So even though it may be 100 degrees inland, 106 in Palm Springs, as you get closer and closer to the water, you can see that the water is absorbing some of the heat from the air so that the temperature is dropping the closer you get to the ocean. And then the actual ocean is a pretty consistent temperature. So water's high specific heat again is traced to hydrogen bonding because heat is absorbed when hydrogen bonds break, which can occur over and over again with water. So that loose hydrogen bonding, that is the cohesion of water, actually comes apart. And when it does that, heat is absorbed. And then once the bonds reattach themselves, so water may break its bonds and then actually come back together, heat gets released when those bonds get formed. So the high specific heat of water minimizes temperature fluctuations to within limits that allow life to occur. Another closely related phenomena that is because of these properties of water is evaporative cooling. So evaporation is defined as the transformation of a substance from a liquid to a gas. And the heat of vaporization is the heat a liquid has to absorb for 1 gram of it to be converted to gas. So as liquid evaporates, its remaining surface cools, and that process is called evaporative cooling. So that's why we sweat, for example, because as we lose water, as that water evaporates, the heat of that liquid, the heat is absorbed by the liquid, leaving the surface cooler where it's come from. So that evaporative cooling helps stabilize the temperature in organisms because of our ability to sweat. Also, that evaporative cooling helps maintain the water temperature at a stable and within a small range. Okay, so the next subject that we want to talk about, the next property of water that's incredibly important to life, is the fact that water is considered a universal solvent. And that's because of the polarity of that water molecule. To just remind you some definitions that you should be familiar with and remember or restudy is that a solution is a liquid that's completely homogeneous mixture of substances. A solvent is the dissolving agent of the solution. So it's the portion that gets dissolved into. The solute is the substance